Welcome once again to The Lost Signals Discusses Games and Gaming Culture, a pretentious, philosophical, pedantic podcast where we focus on various aspects of video games as well as other issues and topics within gaming in general. Hello there, welcome back to The Lost Signals Discusses Games and Gaming Culture. And tonight we're going to do a sort of analysis and discussion about a movie called GTFO, and we'll tell you about it shortly. I, of course, though, remain Scott Thurlow, your host, here with Beth Morgan.
Good evening.
And Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Time to be a misandrist.
As always, and Stephen Amosi.
Hello.
So, quick backstory. GTFO is a documentary sort of film about women in gaming and the culture thereof, made in 2015, I believe, directed by Shannon Sun Higginson. And it sort of like addresses the issue of females in the gaming culture and industry, even at large, and like their experience and how the industry and, again, the culture treats them in general, and sort of lays out some possible moves that could be made to alleviate the sort of tension there. So it's broken up to a couple of like 5 or 6 parts, more or less, right? Some of it is women who are designing games, trying to work within the industry and their experiences. So some of it is female gamers and their experiences like online and so forth, like the harassment, which is sort of a well-known thing that happens to women in general playing games. So we're going to just have a discussion around that, and I'm going to say that I in our defense, a normal caveat would say is that without Beth being here, we'd be 3 straight white, like the exact like demographic that this sort of movie like sort of not indicts in a sense, like the worst parts of that demographic that come to the forefront when confronted when playing or working with females who are.
I don't think you 3 would be the
right.
worst.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
but we're part of that demographic.
In general, like we do fall into that, but yes, we like to think ourselves as more informed and intellectual about it, and therefore more tolerant and more accepting of women in games and so forth. So we've discussed this issue like briefly here and there previously, but this film was Steve-O, you kickstarted it, I believe, as a personal story.
I did, yeah. I saw it coming out and I was interested, so I gave it, I don't know, $20 or whatever it was, and I got a DVD, which we eventually came to watch, and we're going to talk about it. It's a large part of what's going on in gaming, in the gaming world, in the gaming community, and perhaps I think maybe it was a bigger discussion a little bit ago, but I think it's still
I think it's still definitely relevant, still valid.
It's
for
absolutely
sure.
still a continuing conversation, and I think that it deserves to be talked about to this day, if not more than ever. Then at least I think that it's an interesting discussion to have. So
yeah, and it's still important, of course. Like with the things that are happening and even beyond the gaming sphere, if you will, with the Me Too movement and stuff like that, just addressing this issue like broadly. But this film delves specifically into, of course, to video games and how it applies. And like I said, of course, without an actual woman here, we might be not quite qualified to speak about it. But nevertheless,
So I'm the token vagina.
So
I didn't want to say that.
So we brought Beth in.
I will say that, yes.
But like
We
again,
we were thinking about bringing in a couple more women, but we were concerned that they would flake on us.
it's more scheduling conflicts, not against the gender. See, this is the thorny issue.
That's not a gender thing. That's just specific to those people.
You see, this is the problem with trying to do an episode like this. But we're going to do the best we can, and just again have a discussion framed around like what the film the issues it tried to address, which I think were about like 3 points, like kind of the 3 ones I just laid out.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'll just start with like maybe like a personal like thing / experience of mine in general. Like I get it. What it says is that basically there's a sort of a toxic culture in gaming, both playing games and also like working within the industry, that women just aren't well represented within it. And those of them who are there are often sort of ostracized in a sense. They feel like they're made to feel as if they don't belong Like games are not for you. Games are a male thing. Like it's the 18 to 35-year-old demographic, white straight male, and if this hobby belongs to that demographic, anyone else outside of that is intruding and trying to take this, medium away from us in some way, which is like the prevailing mindset. And this film explores that, and like how that's a toxic thing. It's not again specifically limited to games, but it is a culture issue at large, as I just alluded to earlier. And then sort of some steps, some positive things that are being taken towards working to like sort of eroding that mindset, eroding that monolithic structure, if you will, to make it more inclusive in general. So open up thoughts on that.
So it's weird to me because I grew up playing games with women. I had cousins who I played.
I mean, playing video games with women.
Yes,
See,
exactly.
I'm going to try to keep it as
no, but I
mature as possible.
I didn't mean that with any kind of a double entendre.
Sure.
I played video games with women, and I had a cousin. We used to play Secret of Mana back in the day, the 3-player
excellent game.
Games, and throughout my entire life, I've always had a female presence in the video game culture. So it struck me as strange that this is even an issue, because again, it was normal throughout my entire life for women to play these games, and I understand it in the sense that there's a certain block that views it with identity. I'm a video gamer. I don't want others intruding upon
taking my thing away from me.
Masculine identity I have. It's something I have to be proud of. You have your other group that just are just bad people who I don't think they're necessarily they're misanthropes, if more so than they are misogynists, and just will take out any hatred on the world on women for this. And I think there's another group that, especially online with the anonymity, it's that kind of herd mentality. I think people jump in to shout down just because they want to feel like they belong, which is, again, goes back to the first part too of this kind of identity view.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I don't know. I saw this movie when it came out in 2015,
I believe, yeah.
So it came out in 2015. I don't remember if that's when I saw it. I would assume so. So that was right about when we started.
To be fair, we just wanted to cover this movie since then,
and we've been talking about it like on and off, and we kind of made a place for it here, and I'm glad that we're finally talking about it, because I think it's a movie that I think it's a documentary that it's a lot of people kind of shouting out all this shit that's been happening for a long time, and finally being able to finally being given somewhat of a platform for it. I'm glad that happened, and I don't know. I think it's gonna be looked at in a lot of different ways by a lot of different people, and I'm sure it already has. At this point, it's 3 years old now.
But still, I think all its points still stand, are still valid, and need to be.
Well, yeah. I think
addressed.
it's an important thing to come out, because it says, "Hey, here's a point of view that has not really been considered before, or has not really been looked at,
or
before."
as much." Yeah.
And I have a lot of empathy for this, for everybody that comes on and says, "Hey, I'm willing to come onto this movie, come onto this documentary, and say something
and talk about my
this
experience,"
because I'm sure every single one of these women that came on and said something has gotten a ton of shit for it.
No, in fact, that
is
demonstrable.
and they had and many of them had already gotten a lot of shit before that. But
and whatever was done against them after this would be on the websites they were talking about, where it was called out, which is a good thing.
Right, and it takes something to stand up and say, "Hey, I have been getting, rape threats, fucking told that people are going to kill my family, all this stuff that actually gets talked about," and they just read off. It's not like, "Oh, this is this is what I've been going through. It's like, hey, here are the things that I'm reading off of
Like
the
they're
website.
actually, like, literally reading
People
messages
are
that have-
telling me, and it's kind of disconcerting. And yeah, there's a normalizing feel
Factor, I guess
to
we'll
like
say.
some of how this, like, you kind of read about it and you're like, oh yeah, it's kind of what happens. But to see people come on and talk about it brings it to a humanizing point of view to an extent, I think. And you know, I enjoyed this film. I enjoyed this documentary the first time I saw it, and I enjoyed it again in a kind of a different way this time. Seeing it through the eyes of somebody who's been through 3 years since then, and you know, you see a couple of video games come out with a more feminist standpoint. Like it's nowhere near where perhaps where it's a 50-50 split or anything like that.
But certainly we've seen an improvement.
It's nice to see
it
like
is better.
it's nice to see like games like Horizon Zero Dawn come out and like things like
Hellblade
that. So,
as well.
And Hellblade.
I would
Yeah,
say.
exactly. Anyway, Beth, I am most interested to hear what you have to say about this.
I am glad this movie exists because I think that these things are better when they are aired out, when people know that they are happening. It would surprise me if this was surprising at this point in the game to anyone, but I suppose it could be. Still, it's good to know what's happening rather than pretending that everything is pretty and nice and people treat each other kindly, because that's just not the way.
It's not humanity in general.
Things work.
For sure.
No.
I used to think, maybe 10 years ago, that the gaming community, the science fiction community, was a nicer community than the world at
More
large.
accepting.
I've since learned that that's not the case. not through any horrible personal experience, but it's just, it's no better than the larger community. I'm not sure that it's worse. Maybe there are some instances where it's worse, but I am never surprised by a story that a woman tells about some horrible thing a man has said, or just a liberty a man has taken.
In whatever sphere.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. So I'm surprised when people are surprised, I guess. But I guess if you don't look for it, you don't see it, which is why I'm glad these things are happening. And I accept that there's a danger that the pendulum can swing too far at certain points and create anger that is not helpful. But that's just how it has to go before it comes back to a world that is better.
Sort of the nature of it in general. Like, and like you said, like the film they make a point of it itself, saying like, listen, as you said, if we ignore this, if we stay silent about it, then it will never be addressed, it'll never be changed, right? So like the mere fact, as you said, that it exists is a positive thing, because those who are willing to go on and say like, here's my experience, and needs to be changed. Like, we need to get it out there, the people be aware of it, and that again, like I said, a toxic-ish culture, or can be, at least at times, and often is, so that if you share your
Or
experiences...
at least it has toxic aspects to the culture.
Exactly, right? Like, there's elements to it that just aren't good, and that's endemic of, I would argue, society in general, always has been in a sense. Like, gender inequality is a big issue just as a whole.
Yeah.
It's just that this one focuses on like the aspects that are that, again, women gamers have to deal with within the gaming community, which has not often, or at least wasn't as brought to light, or it was accepted as status quo, as maybe E might speak to in a sec, where like, yeah, the normalization is, you're, again, a straight, like, 18, 20, 35-year-old male, and anything outside that is looked at as an sort of negative thing, as you're infringing upon a hobby in which I somehow own for reasons of like privilege, I suppose, or at least a perceived privilege there, I guess we'll say. So,
if you allow me to jump in,
go ahead. Yeah,
I'll give a little bit of a speech.
Mm-hmm.
There's an old kind of thought experiment, which everyone here is familiar with because I brought it up, about a man is driving with his son. They get into a car accident. The father dies. the child is brought to the hospital. The doctor comes out and says, "I can't operate on the child. He's my son." How nowadays it seems like a relic of the past, and it is. But back then it would be like it's a male it has to be a male doctor because it's been normalized.
I get the Chris teacher. It's like, oh,
what?
Yeah.
Impossible. His
Female
father
doctor,
came back to life and is operating on him.
Yeah.
I imagine there are still some people who would be surprised by it.
Actually,
that's
there's an
kind of the
interesting
problem.
one is
Yeah.
that nowadays though,
Or do they assume they're gay?
is now. Not that it's a big issue, but like that kind of
it's evolving, but still, like people's perceptions of like.
But again, that's saying that it's a greater thing to the success of gay people than it is to necessarily women, which is an interesting point. But nonetheless, so I did a big project on semantic normalization for bias in language, and this is a lot. Like when people have a concept of gamer in their head, it's generally a male,
a stereotypical template.
You brought it up, but the thing is, a template you have in your head, and saying a male gamer, if you're not making a direct comparison, is almost redundant. Whereas female gamer is adding, in a sense, new information into the context.
It's like an asterisk qualifier that shouldn't need to be there, but somehow is.
But it is, and that happens. It happens with nurse and male nurse. You don't need to necessarily say female nurse, and these are the biases we have in language
that are ingrained.
And it's the unmarked one is the one that you have the template for, and the marked one is the one you have to qualify. And what's interesting is that I'm a big proponent of what called normalization, which is to make it normal in society for it to be like that.
Broadly
you're a
applicable
gamer. It doesn't matter you if you're male or female. We just actually what's interesting if you look up like images for doctors, you'll see like entirely different genders, different races, all in the same photo because it's an attempt to say that anyone could be a doctor. Is not just
but it
male.
Required someone doing that on purpose.
I was going to say, they mentioned this in the beginning of the documentary where they said you don't need to say male film goer or you don't need to say female film goer. They said if you're a film goer, you don't even need to like.
Or in general, they said people identify like it's as if gamer is some kind of like weirdly like precious label that people identify solely as, right? In a sense,
you don't even have to say you're a film goer. You're just a film goer. Everyone is.
Like people go to movies and do other shit too. People play games, but somehow like I'm a gamer and that's my one and only identifying factor in some sense.
Actually, what's funny is that though filmmaker doesn't have a gender specific, it is a kind of class specific. Like people have an image in their mind of like what a person who enjoys movies is. So there will always be a comparison there because there's always something normalized in the head. The thing is, it's to get the point of normalization is to get rid of the more toxic elements of it.
Yeah.
But this is what's because I did have a problem with what they were saying. I like their intent. I sympathize with their, but I'm not directly affected by this. And a weird prejudice developed in my mind too because a number of the women who are dealing with this with great immediacy are facing this backlash like as we speak, to be hyperbolic. I was viewing it in a more gradualistic sense of like, let's if we just take a step back and over time this will fix itself. But to the person under immediate duress, gradualism is an offense.
That isn't helpful. Yeah.
And I grew to understand that because there's so this is called radicalism, but I'm not a big fan of that term for the implications. I actually Beth offered this one, punctuated equilibrianism, which is the biological term for that, but it
still applies to this
wonderful term.
I do.
And this thing is like I understand that there are people out there who have careers in the field who enjoy this as hobbies who are being harassed now, and I'm more sympathetic with their cause now for that.
No.
So, I've never been in the situation where I've been harassed online or in a game community. I feel like I've been sort of insulated because the people that I am surrounded by don't care if I'm a female.
Aren't misogynistic dicks, essentially.
Exactly.
Or
they don't
just,
assume I'm a certain
stereotypical
way.
in general, yeah.
We can joke around and nothing. I never get threatened with rape. I never get called names
Nasty
simply
words.
for being a woman. But
Slurs.
I did learn early on if I was going to go in like a multiplayer environment with strangers, I was going to go in as a man. Like I was not going to have an avatar that was a female because that female tends to get humped just randomly by strangers.
Yeah, and it's the toxic culture of it. Like it's perpetuates itself.
I don't really put myself in those situations, so I've never been in the situation that the women in the movie in the film were in, but I have kept myself out of those situations on purpose because
you're aware of the
bad behaviors by people in that community.
Right, and that's kind of the specific thing is like, should you have to change the way that you like present yourself in a video game
just because of that?
To not get fucking sexually harassed or
who's not overly social anyway, I'm more comfortable in the single player environment.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but I think all of us too, but yeah.
Just the only time I would ever go into, say, Elder Scrolls Online, I did have an account there, but I was going to play with friends of mine and my husband, and so I did create a female character, but I knew that she wasn't going to be alone.
Because it was a safe space in a sense. Yeah.
Right. If I wasn't going to have a group with me, I would have been a man.
That's so fucked up. Like you have to take into account whether or not you're going to be alone when you create a virtual character in a video game.
Yeah, and again,
right?
it
I know
speaks
that,
to a greater issue at large.
You hear that all the time in terms of like real life is like, don't go anywhere alone, like at night in a questionable area or whatever. But like, you literally can't go anywhere alone at night in a questionable area in a fucking video game as a woman.
It's different because it's more of just a discomfort than you feel like a physical threat.
Right.
But
sure, but still, like it's unnerving for sure, and as many of the interviewees pointed out in the film as well. So I guess I'll say this: like it's a penny arcade thing. Like they came up with the greater internet fuckwad theory, right? Like in the cyber
story about penny arcade.
No, in the cyber, yes, but in general, like because it's not physical, like not personal interaction, you could be the biggest dickhead ever. Like it's always been true since the internet, like became a thing. So therefore, like people just feel like they're less restrained about it, and especially when it's male versus in quotes like female interactions in a sense, right?
Right, but people here's the thing that like always stuck with me, and like when I hear things like this, like no one has ever threatened me with like to fucking violate my asshole, right?
Online,
and like people threaten like sexual violence against women. That has never happened to me online.
It has happened to me, but
again, no, you know what? That's not true.
That's the thing.
It's happened to me, but like not in a fucking real way. Like nobody's fucking doxed me or like threatened to like fucking tell my destroy my fucking family or any shit like that. Like
sure, and that's some serious fucked up shit.
That's crazy. Yeah. That's crazy people saying crazy shit. And like I don't want to mess with crazy people. Like I'm not trying to get down and like fucking play video games with crazy people that are trying to rape my family, right? Like if anybody's going to say that is fucked up insane shit.
But that's kind of what I'm saying, like,
and like that but that becomes normalized, right? Like in
like
multiplayer
it becomes
games.
like the accepted like culture, like the default status quo is like,
it's like you're just gonna get that. Like, fuck you! I should not ever be getting.
Well,
no one should ever be getting that. That's like using the
excuse of like, oh, they're just being locker room kind of people.
Yeah,
exactly.
But nobody in a locker room says that they're gonna rape your family. Like that's not a thing that happens.
You haven't been in the right locker rooms.
I haven't. I've only been in the right locker rooms.
Sure. But no, like I said, like it kind of goes to what I just said, like that you can say anything you want to, and it becomes so egregiously and even more like uncomfortably threatening, of course, in that instance. So that you're right, like I've had insults leveraged at me, racial slurs, many kinds of slurs when I was playing online multiplayer, and it's sort of like it's as the film addresses, like the sort of like acceptably defaultly like the culture of it, which obviously it shouldn't be, but somehow because again it's online interaction, so you're not like.
Have you ever played with do you talk? When
I did play MMO games, yes I did.
Okay, have you ever thought about
for a while and then you cut it off? If I recall.
But what if you played with a name that was like a feminine name and didn't talk?
I haven't. I will. Now you bring it up, Beth. I was going to say this, but I will tell you guys a couple stories in our audience as well.
Story on the
right, there's a couple of them.
Yeah.
So I want to address the thing you said. So going back to the avatar thing, right? You played with a male avatar. A friend of mine from college would play with a female avatar, although he was a man. And again, cynically, he would say, I'd be like, why'd you do that? Well, because people think I'm a woman, or assume it at least, because my avatar implies as such. And then they start giving me stuff. Like, they think I'm, like, they're hitting, like, he, like, reverse, like, trolled them in a sense, like, to get advantages, if you will, in a one game. Another time, I was involved in a relationship or two where I was playing a game, and the woman I was with came over, and I gave her the headset. I was playing the game. I was playing Halo, whatever, 2 or 3 maybe. I was playing in the round, but she was talking as if, like, whatever I was doing, my actions were her.
Yeah.
And she took a lot of shit from it. Like basically as laid out in GTFO itself.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it's a different dynamic. When people assume that it's a woman playing the game, then it changes their, like, again, if you're a toxic misogynistic dickhead, you become even worse. Even if a round before that, it was me talking to them, I was like, no, I'm gonna let my girlfriend play, even though it was still me playing. And of course, it changed their perception of it as well. But
right.
To be fair, I had, like, a generic name, really. It probably was, like, defaultly male-centered, but it didn't really say anything. It didn't, like, say either way. Like, you couldn't really get much out of it. But nevertheless, the dynamic and the interaction changed given based on who was speaking and what gender they were.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share some stories then, too. I'm a teaching assistant at Pacific County Community College, and
Shout
I
out.
teach in, it's a great school.
What's up out there?
Sort of. But it's a great computer science department, which is what I work in. And I work in STEM, which doesn't have a lot of women in the field. And what's really interesting is getting to know the students there and how women get treated, because there's not really any harsh attacking of women in this field, but
in this atmosphere.
What's really weird is that generally I find women have to either have boyfriends or tell people they have boyfriends, or go claim to be lesbians when they aren't, and it's very interesting to me because there's a lot of guys treat them with. So on the film, there was the benevolent male gamers who went out looking to protect. But
Right.
you have a lot of the guys who treat the women as either sexual partners in the waiting or as women that they protect, and there's very little,
which also
normal,
has somewhat unfortunate implications.
Absolutely, but there's very little relationships on that one-on-one level, because
like you're on my same level,
Yeah.
and
just
like
my
we're
buddy,
just
you know,
peers.
playing. Yeah.
it's really strange to me because I had to keep I'm the teacher, like I can only
Dynamic.
get so close, but it's such a interesting, actually seeing these guys probably go home and scream at women over video games, as far as as at least some of them probably do, and it's weird to see them interact with people with real life.
Yeah.
In the movie, though, the ones that were on like a squad with the Jen woman
Yeah.
Yes,
who
I have a
played
name.
multiplayer games,
Jen Hannah, I believe.
they didn't seem to me to be protecting her as just sort of like she could protect herself, and she recorded things and she would talk back to people, and I'm not saying it didn't bother her, because obviously it would bother anyone, but she didn't seem to need protection, but they were there
To
not
support-
ignoring the
yeah.
situation
Yeah.
and kind of being backup. Like, that's how I would want someone to act,
I-
not necessarily
yeah.
to take my cause and fight my battle for me, but to not ignore
Fight them with
the situation.
you as well. in a
I love
sense.
that they were
I
good
think
friends.
a lot of people do just ignore it because no one wants to really get into a conflict,
Yeah.
or a lot of people don't. So everyone just kind of
I don't like confrontation, Rick.
one bad person in a situation like this can ruin it for everyone, because everyone just kind of shrinks into themselves, the men and the women.
Yeah.
Not just the women being attacked, but the men who are uncomfortable. No one knows what to do.
That was actually one of the funniest, probably the funniest part of the documentary, when they had the they were basically just being good friends.
Yeah.
And somebody would be talking to the one woman on the squad, and be like, "Hey, you want to
Hey, baby,
have sex
blah, blah,
or
blah,
whatever?"
blah, blah, yeah.
And they were like, "No," and like the guys were like, "Nah, not really."
One guy was like, "Yeah, sure." Like, yeah. It was like again, it was a great troll against it.
Exactly. And like that was perfect. That's exactly the response that you should have. Is like, no, just like assume that you're talking to everyone, and that's it.
This is where I would like the pendulum to end up.
Yeah,
In a situation
exactly.
where everybody acts like that.
I don't have that faith in humanity to think that they are like that beyond what they could be. I think they generally either have the little sister mentality or the. That's just my personal prejudice.
Maybe, but like again, like I'm gonna say this like as a broad thing as well. Yeah, so going back to what you were saying to me earlier. Yeah, I when I was playing like in my heyday, if you will, of online multiplayer shooters mostly. Yeah, I got so annoyed because I fucking hate humanity, like in general.
Yeah.
I find you, moronic for the most part, and
Scott despises you, viewer.
maybe not our viewers, but like
You are a
again,
misanthrope.
but maybe some of you. Like, listen, I'm not gonna like sugarcoat it here. If you're an annoying dickhead, no matter what gender or like etc., like you fall under, you're an annoying dickhead, and I'm gonna hate you. So I muted everybody eventually, right?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you another story. I have another a platonic female friend of mine that we were friends for many years, and she was a big gamer, and we played games together. She was quite good at games. In fact, some of the games she was better than me, like outright for sure. I was like, dude, and I would speak to her like there was no difference to me. I'm like, dude, snipe him over there. You're the better sniper. Go get him. Like, and she would do it. Like, she would be great at the game, and again, but she would take a lot of shit. Like, if she ever said anything back to me, just to me, like. Over the match,
Over the comms.
yeah. Then of course, like all the assholes on the work, are like, hey baby, hey blah 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 blah. Every annoying sexist troll thing you've ever heard would be leveraged at her, and that's like again like a great like that's the whole one of the major points that GTFO addresses is that women will just take this abuse or not take it, but they're confronted with it, and because it's sort of acceptable in that culture at large, but not to me, of course, like not to us.
Yeah, like
It, but it's just again, annoying humanity, asshole. Like, go to any bar, nothing to do with games, and see how men react to women there, like interact with women there.
It's not just in games. Like you
That's
learn
what
as
I'm
a woman
saying.
to ignore this stuff when you're at like a kind of obscenely young age to just ignore people who are gonna yell things at you. That's
and I mean that's what that's the stories that I've heard from many people, and like so like it's not this like it's not like, hey, I really take offense to that one guy saying what's up baby or whatever. It's not that. It's and like I almost feel like this term is overused, or like I have but like
Yeah.
I have like a specific reaction to this, but like microtransgressions is a fucking real thing, right? Like,
Sure.
you hear
microaggressions.
Did you just conflate microtransactions and microaggressions? That's fucking awesome.
I did.
Hopefully,
do that.
no game features microtransgressions, but maybe they will.
Hold on.
I'm developing that game.
Microtransgressions is a whole other.
There's many
is a
terms
whole
to
other
use.
thing
All right.
that I'm inventing
All
right now. No, microaggressions.
Go on.
Is a real thing. Like it's just
Sure.
like
You're right.
You just get like hit with these like little fucking. It's the death of 1,000 fucking needles, right? Like
Yeah.
it's you just like get hit with this like over and over and over and over and over. You can ignore it once, twice, 3 times, maybe 100 times, but like eventually, it's gonna be really.
Yeah.
At best, just really fucking annoying. At worst, like it's really gonna
Still
fucking
creepy
break you
and
down
threatening.
like
Yeah.
like just fucking annoy the shit out of you. And like I've had not to put myself in that same situation because I haven't had it anywhere near as bad as like women that just get fucking
Constantly.
hammered every day when they're playing video games or anything like that. But like I've had points where I've been like, hey, dude, shut the fuck up. Stop saying the same thing every day that is just annoying and just offensive all the time. Like, and I've gotten to the breaking point where I'm like, you need to stop fucking saying this. Like, just stop it.
Yeah,
Like,
but that's
you
humanity,
don't think
you
it's
see.
offensive, but it really fucking is. You know, like
Everything is terrible.
everything is awful.
Which is broadly
Everyone
true.
is terrible.
Yes.
Oh, this is
Also
it's the
broadly
opposite
true.
of the Lego song. Everything is awesome.
Sure.
It's everything is awful.
It's that most people are awful, and of course, so if again, I guess I'll say it this way: if that's broadly true, which I think it broadly is, then that's going to be true in the video game sphere, like by default, clearly. Like, you know what I mean? It's just a subsection of it.
I disagree that everyone is awful.
Most people.
Most people are awful.
I don't even agree with that. I
Okay.
think that most people, if they really thought about it,
Neutral?
might try not to make people feel like they want to die.
But do
But
they
maybe
think about
that's
it?
the crux.
But do
Exactly,
they
Beth.
think about it? That's the
I
question.
think that's
Do they?
the
Yeah.
problem that no.
that humanity has in
Yeah,
general. I
that's
guess
the
that's my point. Like,
that's the
you're
issue.
right. Maybe
It's more of a laziness.
Nobody's
than an
trying to be
evil.
awful, but it's like a...
you just are by default.
The banality of evil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of the banality.
It's like the thing.
Mwah.
It's like the thing. Yeah.
Mwah, the banality
The thing
of
from
evil,
Batman.
yes.
We didn't think he was intently fucking you over. No, just accidentally. So, like, yeah, which is you're right. And like seriously, like to that point, it's something I'd struggle with in a sense. Like if only you thought about what the fuck you were doing, but you can't. Like you're incapable of it. Like people at large, humanity at large. Again,
It is.
yes, fuck humanity
It is.
by
Like,
and large.
if you go and ask somebody, hey, were you trying to be a dickhead? 95% of the time they'll say no. Sometimes they'll say yes.
Of
for
course
sure.
not.
But
But it didn't
most
even
of the
cross
time,
their mind. That
they'll say
it's
no.
impossible.
They'll say no. However, look, it doesn't matter. Your intent in the end doesn't really matter because you're going to come off as a dickhead or
Either
not.
way. Yeah, you're right.
And there is a gray line in there as well, which we could talk about forever, Ian, which I know you're fucking jonesing to do
Address
right
it
now.
briefly if you wish.
No. I just more wanted to make that expression to trigger
To make sure,
Steve.
Of course, there are times where like people think that people are being dickheads where they're really not, and of course there are times where people are being dickheads where they don't realize it. And somewhere in the middle is where reality is, right?
But
Somewhere we
anytime you
wouldn't.
threaten someone and say, I hope you get raped or I hope your family
Yeah,
dies,
you're being a dickhead.
that is crossing a line.
You are
Yeah.
being a dickhead if you've ever done
Like
that.
there's no question about it when that
There's no
yeah.
argument against this, Ian.
Yeah, there's no gray area.
Don't argue it.
I once left a note to a boss upon quitting, saying something that your evil is greater than a murder, rape, and genocide because at least those inspire others to do good acts to make up for that evil.
That's
You're the
very
insidious
elaborate.
type of evil which you just want to cause other people to hurt.
But you weren't threatening this person
Yeah,
with those
you weren't
acts.
saying you were going to do
No.
those
So-
things. Yeah,
Also, wow.
Steve was turning very red. He's embarrassed for you in a sense.
I am sort of.
But no, I mean, again, of
That's
course,
intense.
your mileage is going to
Fucking
vary
intense.
on how you like, how much insulting you'll tolerate and what you think you're being insulted with. But there's a clear there's certainly a barrier in which you're like, yeah, this is. You shouldn't be saying this.
Hey,
And
cut it the
it's-
fuck out.
Yeah, and it's threatening. And that's, again, it seems to just be more prevalent, in, if not more prevalent. You can point to it easier within the gaming sphere, as GTFO points out, because it's sort of more specialized in a sense.
What I would say is, well, yes, that is something that is dealt with a lot in terms, and something that GTFO deals with very specifically. The movie that we watched, somewhat more insidious, is just the banal hey, the banal thought that hey, women don't belong in video games, or hey, if you're a woman, you're not as good at video games as men are, or something like that.
Or there's something wrong with you because you're a woman trying to be in video games.
The very explicit stuff happens a lot and is fucked up and really shitty. But
sort of the ingrained.
that's probably the rind of the shitty video game toxic environment that exists.
No, I agree.
And
Yes,
the core, the fruit of that environment is really just thinking that people don't belong there, or a certain type of person doesn't belong there, or
right, as if they're infringing on something.
or
somehow.
if you've played video games for 12 years and you are super great at fucking hardcore video games, that other people that are trying to break into them are somehow less than you, things like that. I think those things stop people from playing video games far more than the really, really toxic elements that are just the
outright
the icing on the
threats and
cake
so forth,
of what talking about this type of thing,
No, you're right. It's sort of like it's an accepted sort of status quo. and again, it could be true of anything. Like if you're a hardcore, like I don't know, like I'll pick like soccer fan or something. Like, oh, you don't know as much as me. You haven't followed as much, so therefore you don't deserve to be in this sphere. You don't deserve to like this hobby as much or something like that.
Because it devalues your identity if you view yourself as
exactly. You're right, and the film makes a point of that, which I think is very much true. Like that's going to be true of psychology, humanities psychology in general. Like I said.
So let's make an optimistic point, right? Like if you are a video gamer who has been playing video games for a long time and you're really hardcore into gaming, find those people that want to get into gaming and fucking help them play games.
That's what I would like to do too.
Maybe
Get
also
them into
people should define themselves by more than one aspect of their personality.
And that's the film points
That's
that
also
out
true.
very much as well.
people are lazy, as you pointed out.
Lazy and stupid, and they want to define themselves with one thing. And
I mean, you know what? If
it's
you're
somewhat
if
of a joke, but
you know what? If you only want to define yourself as a gamer, fine, but don't exclude other people from coming into your sphere. You know,
exactly. And in fact, like I've always touted this, and in fact, we saw a talk at the if you anyone call it our Mapapka talks, where one of the talks in my in the video game part was. It brings people together. That's always kind of been my point, or at least it has the potential to do so, right? If you're not a complete dickhead asshole about it and about anything in general, you know what I mean? Like then it's an opportunity to meet new people and to bring them like not into the fold for like just exchange ideas. Like, oh, you want to get into this game? Okay, let's talk about it. Let's learn some things together. Let's go over it together.
Yeah.
And if you like this, you might like some other things within this. You know, let's again. Have a conversation about it and not just be closed-minded and close people off just because we feel as if you're superior to it, even though I feel I'm superior to all of the other moronic dickheads who don't have the capacity to do the very thing I just said.
Scott, we know you've got your own superiority complex, but you are fucking working with it, man. You're working within it.
But I'm not just closing people off by...
Get in there, fucking... By
various other
work
aspects.
with other people on that shit and...
But
there's room enough in the video game industry. There's enough games. There's enough people. There's enough people making games that everyone can kind of find something that they like. And just the fact that you don't like something that someone else plays or the way that someone else does it,
it doesn't completely devalue it.
It doesn't. There's room
or negate it. And that's another. To be fair, that's another thing that the film pointed out where a couple of the interviewees were running programs to teach women, specifically girls and like young girls and women, to program to make the game. If the games are being made that you want, make them yourselves. We'll teach you the skills to do it, and that is just a good thing again for any industry as a whole, for producers, for people who have the skills to make the product, to produce the product they would like to see. Absolutely. If it's not being made for them already.
And that one, the game developer for the Dragon Age games, she was getting a lot of flack for having like gay relationships in the game and just things that they thought were ruining the games. But then don't play the game that way. If you don't want to,
you don't have to have that relationship in Dragon Age. Like, it's the point that's been made.
What's really weird is that it seemed to have been focused on Dragon Age 2, but if I remember correctly, in the first one, you can also have gay relationships in it. And it seems to be like all of a sudden, like,
because a woman's writing it, it's fucked up.
Yeah, again, it's a double standard, but you're right. I believe that is correct, if I recall correctly.
I think she wrote both.
Beth might remember better than me.
Maybe it was just the troll army found it at the
sure.
Yeah. They were also complaining about too because it was smaller and there was just
there were complaints about
it was being
complaints
liberalized
about
somehow.
Dragon Age 2, like
gay agenda was coming in.
There were complaints about Dragon Age 2, like beyond all that stuff, just in general, and Inquisition it hadn't come out yet, and at that point. But anyway, like to talk about a positive note, it does make the film does a good job of saying, hey, listen, if you want to affect, I know it's kind of a cliche thing to say, but be the change you want to see in the world, right. In a sense. And like, I do buy into that to an extent. That like, of course, like if enough people go into the industry, or at least have the nowadays at least have the technology to produce games that aren't beholden to the old club, if you will, the old guard, then that will affect change, like just sort of like by default, like by sheer like force of will in a sense and force of numbers.
That's the idea, that you take the first stab, you get the pushback from it, keep doing it, and all of a sudden it's not new anymore. It's
now
something
it's
accepted.
cool. Yeah, exactly.
And then one day it's normal, and it's.
I think we're already starting to see that. The
No,
first move into it, anyway.
Yeah,
like
we're starting to see
And
positive
there's
changes
always
from
some
it.
You see games like
backlash.
Horizon
Once things
Zero
start to
Dawn.
move in a direction, there's always like some pushback.
Yeah.
And then things get
Exactly.
worse for a bit, and then
People
Listen.
were pissed off that Assassin's Creed had a female protagonist.
Britain didn't like that we wanted to be our own country, and look how that worked out. So I'm just saying, there was some pushback.
And
on
now
that.
we're at now. Don't get us started on politics.
Regardless,
Don't,
I'm just saying.
I wasn't. I was just saying that.
Ian, don't get started on politics.
If anything, I think the most important thing to come out of this is the fact that video games are becoming a more mainstream
More accessible.
thing.
Yeah.
Thus, these conflicts are coming up. Back during Atari, you didn't see these conflicts
Yeah.
for other reasons than just time. But
Sure.
I think it's important that it's becoming a medium that is becoming more established, more people are
recognized.
interested in it. Different groups with different. I don't want to say agendas, but like
Just different ideas and different perspectives.
Are when I look at and show the world differently. This is a good thing. It's good for any art to have different viewpoints.
I absolutely agree, and
I think also I think video games offer something that maybe the only other medium that could do this is maybe reading a novel or something. So you see the world from a different perspective.
yes.
So play a video game from a perspective that's not your own. If you're a guy, play as a girl.
I've started doing that.
It doesn't actually make
often,
you a
like,
girl.
Previously, yeah.
You can play as a gay character, and it doesn't make you gay. You can play.
If you're secure enough in your identity, it's not like
You can
video games are
play-
turning me gay or whatever. Like video games turn into a girl.
You can play as a cat character. You don't become a cat. It's just but it might
By
make
the way,
you see the
Khajiit
world
was awesome in
slightly
Skyrim.
different.
Play as one.
Exactly. But it might help you see the world in a different way and expand your horizon,
Exactly.
and that is always a good thing, in my opinion.
I will tell one final quick personal story. Like again, somewhat in recent years, like for example, Saints Row 3. I was bored of playing the same stale, like white bread male protagonist who I am in real life. So I played like a really a Russian woman with a redhead Russian woman with a very thick Russian accent is one of the options. For example, Horizon Zero Dawn, which we voted one of the best games.
Mhm.
You're defaultly a female protagonist, a really interesting and well done one. So yeah, I do think it's a very positive change that we're seeing all these things. We're seeing somewhat of at least more of a shift towards it, more perspectives, and breaking away from the club again that used to be. So I think GTFO was very interesting. I would say definitely check it out, recommend it, and to again just elevate yourself. Delve into this if this is your hobby for games. See some more the other sides of perspective that you might normally not have encountered, and think about some of the issues that are being faced and what we can do to positively change them in the future.
Right. See how other people view the video game industry, especially if you're like me, Scott, and Ian, if you're a straight white guy, you can see how other people view this without changing in and of yourself. You can take it
because for a
sympathetic
lot
eye
of the
to
time,
this.
we have all been forced to play as the straight male.
That's
White
absolutely
And it
true.
becomes
That's been
boring.
the default
It's-
character. So
yeah.
I have been that.
It's the
I have
bland.
been a straight white guy in a video game before. That's.
I feel like
Sure.
you've been a straight
It's
white
super
guy for
fun.
most of your life, most of your video game life, right?
Sure.
Probably.
But
It's
hopefully,
also fun to play as other characters.
yeah, and hopefully we'll see some more diversity, and which is, as Ian said, that is good for art in general, and especially I say for games as well. So yeah, I think this film did a good job of addressing these issues, and hopefully you got something out of this. And again, just try to break out of your mold and see what can be done and what perspectives are out there, and how people are being affected who aren't you, but that might be interested in doing something like this. And then, therefore, we can all collectively affect a positive change and a positive push forward with it. So,
Let's see some new games.
that's pretty much
Lots and lots of new games.
That's all I really want.
and maybe we'll
Lots and lots of new games.
we'll be making one ourselves soon as well.
We'll see.
But yeah, either way, I think that might be doing it for now. Anyone have any final thoughts? Anything missed or any didn't address?
I'm all right.
I have one thing.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, from Nichelle Nichols, the great and powerful Uhura from the original Star Trek series. When I saw her once at a Star Trek convention, someone asked her the question if she was angry about the new Star Treks coming out and someone else playing Uhura and them kind of recasting everyone and doing it over. And she said, the universe is big enough. I'm paraphrasing. This is not a direct quote.
Sure.
The universe is big enough for everyone. It's okay that there's another Uhura. It's okay that there's another version of things. No one's the bad guy. It's not being a straight white
There's no
man
one
is
be all
not-
end
is not
all.
a bad
Yeah.
thing. It's just
It's just a thing that's
it's
not the only
it's not
thing.
the only thing.
Right,
That's
exactly.
all.
Universe, in fact, is
There's-
expanding as we speak, so hopefully that is true of all mediums, and especially games.
So that's all.
As a straight white guy, I hope it remains that being a straight white guy is not a bad thing.
Guess
It
we'll
is.
see.
Ah, damn it. Ian's spoken.
But for now, I think we'll leave off with that. So thanks for joining us. As always, this has been Games and Gaming Culture under the Lost Signals banner. I have been Scott Thurlow, here with Beth Morgan
Good night.
and Jonathan Ian Manzer,
TLS, SJW.
and Stephen Amosi.
Have a good night.
See you next time. Thank you for joining the Lost Signals Games and Gaming Culture. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows and more, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.